I give the floor to Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor and for convening this important and timely debate. We join our fellow member states here in expressing appreciation to the President of the General Assembly for her unwavering support, which has been instrumental in elevating these mechanisms from a model resolution to a cornerstone of UN accountability practices. Similarly, we thank the Secretary General for his public endorsement of the Veto Initiative, underscoring the Secretariat's pivotal role in fostering institutional reform. Mr. President, the recent veto exercise on the draft resolution addressing dire and deteriorating situations compels us to reflect not only on the immediate humanitarian consequences, but on the broader implications for international diplomacy, peacekeeping, and the credibility of the multilateral system we all depend on. For Timor-Leste, a nation whose history is marked by conflict, solidarity, and the hard work of rebuilding, the stakes could not be clearer. We sincerely believe in the principles of collective security and multilateral cooperation, and we welcome the growing openness among some permanent members of the Council to engage in reform, including discussions on the appropriate use of the veto. However, the reality remains that the Article 27.3 of the Charter grants 5 states the power to unilaterally block substantive resolutions unilaterally, even when an overwhelming majority of the Council, or indeed the General Assembly, stands ready to act. This arrangement, designed 8 decades ago in the aftermath of the Cold War, or of a world war, no longer reflects today's geopolitical or moral landscape. We have all witnessed the consequences when vetoes are cast in the face of escalating violence. In 2025 alone, the Security Council has struggled to respond decisively to urgent crises, including the vetoed Gaza-related draft resolution in June, which occurred against the backdrop of mounting humanitarian needs and repeated warnings in the Secretary General's reports. When lives are at stake, delays are deadly. Mr. President, vetoes of this kind do not merely express disagreement. They isolate the Council from those it is mandated to protect, undermine its authority, and erode global trust in our shared institutions. As a member of G7+ country, that has lived through the failures and the promise of international engagement, Timor-Leste insists that no political calculus can justify inaction in the face of mass suffering. It is essential to acknowledge the inherent imbalance between permanent and non-permanent members. The 10 elected members, representing the diversity of our regions, often bring fresh ideas and the people-centered lens to crisis response. However, a single permanent member can override their efforts. More than 300 vetoes have been cast since the UN's founding, many in situations involving atrocity crimes, moments when decisive action was most needed. The veto must never be used when genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing are at stake. Doing so contradicts not only the responsibility to protect, but also the fundamental moral principles upon which this organization was founded. Mr. President, the urgency of Security Council reform cannot be overstated. The Council's composition and its decision-making structures are increasingly misaligned with a world of shifting power centers, persistent conflict, and climate-driven fragility. The Secretary General's UN 80 initiative, launched this year, has reminded us that repairing the credibility of multilateralism depends on institutions that are inclusive, legitimate, and accountable. The reaffirmations in the 2030 or 2050 Pact for the Future have amplified calls from Africa, from the Global South, from small island developing states, including my own, for a council that reflects the realities of our century, not the last. Encouragingly, The July 2025 elements paper from the intergovernmental negotiations has crystallized real momentum. It identifies the regulation of veto use as a central pillar of reform and builds on initiatives that many states have long championed. Over 100 countries now support the French-Mexico initiative for voluntary veto restraint in mass atrocity situations, and 121 states, including 2 permanent members, are signatories to the ACT's group's Code of Conduct on Action Against Atrocity Crimes. Africa's Azulwini Consensus continues to call for at least 2 permanent African seats with veto rights to address historical inequities. Broader proposals envision an expanded council of 21 to 27 members, including longer-term non-permanent seats and more representative regional allocations. Other ideas under discussion, including multi-veto requirements and General Assembly override options, signal a growing will to strengthen legitimacy through checks and balances. Mr. President, Timor-Leste believes that the Council must act and to be seen to act on behalf of those who do not have a voice in the chambers. We reaffirm our commitment to consensus building that prioritizes human life, stability, and dignity above political divides. Moreover, we stand ready to work with all member states to ensure that the Security Council is equipped, both morally and structurally, to meet the challenges of the next generation. In that spirit, Timor-Leste offers 4 recommendations. First, we call for mandatory restraints on the use of vetoes in atrocity situations, with the France-Mexico initiative and the ACT Code serving as the foundation for binding commitments through charter review. Second, we support expanding the Council to 25-27 members, including new permanent seats for Africa, the Asia-Pacific and Latin America, and the Caribbean with veto rights, as well as a rotating seat for small island developing states, complemented by long-term non-permanent seats. Third, we urged strengthened accountability and transparency regarding the use of vetoes, including enhanced General Assembly debates and more inclusive working methods, particularly through the diversification of penholder roles. Finally, we call for an accelerated text-based reform process under the Pact for the Future, aiming to produce concrete outcomes by the 81st UNGA session, including pragmatic veto regulation such as multi-veto thresholds. Mr. President, these steps are not abstract aspirations. They are necessary to revitalize the Council's effectiveness, restore faith in multilateralism, and uphold the principles on which this organization was founded. Timor-Leste remains committed to a future where cooperation prevails over rivalry, where the Council speaks with moral clarity, and where no community is left to face crisis alone. Thank you.